Your life was all I chased as a dreamer. I know I can't deny. Big walls between the sights, I'm a believer. So one day the clouds rolls down, you feel dizzy now. The sun goes down, you're walking through the night. Your skin is sour, would you join me on a ride through the light?
Westminster Bridge. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you are very much encouraged to wave at people on bridges, boats and banksides on this cruise. It's the only time you can wave at people in London and they won't get a restraining order against you. I'm joking. They'll just call the police. You don't get extra points for dads, I'm afraid. Sorry, all you young'uns on board. So, to our right, you'll see one of London's most famous landmarks. Iconic. Here in London, the House of Parliament. It's actually called the New Palace of Westminster. There have been 3 palaces that have stood on this very spot, or 3 versions of this palace. The first palace was just that, a palace for all our kings and queens of England. That unfortunately burnt down in 1513, or parts of it burnt down, and then that was rebuilt. And when it was rebuilt, it was made into Parliament, so the centre for government here in London. That's still what this building is, and it was also was used as the Royal Courts of Justice as well. This then burnt down again. Yeah, I know. History is a cruel thing. Burnt down again in 1834, and this newest palace was rebuilt in 1860. It looks a bit older than it is because of the because of the Gothic revival style that it has been designed in. And like I said, it's the one of the centres for government here in the UK, and our Parliament. Oh look, there's a lovely lady in yellow just waving at you. Wave back. Nick Heading. This is going well. This is going really, really well. Yeah, centre of government here in the UK. Parliament is split into 2 houses. So you've got the House of Commons, who sit in green seats. They are everything green, though they themselves are not green, they are not red. And they are locally elected MPs who debate, put forward legislation. And then you've got the House of Lords. They're our invited politicians. They sit in red seats, they're everything red. And they ratify the legislation, so they say yes or no to it. And the Commons and the Lords have to be separate at all times, apart from when they're debating. And this is to prevent corruption. I'll just leave that one there. The Houses of Parliament actually only refer to the 2 debating chambers inside. So on the opposite bank, in front of you now to your left, you will see 3 identical buildings with grey turrets and weather vanes. These are all that are left of the old Florence Nightingale ward, which formed part of St Thomas Hospital. And there were 7 of them, and they were named after the days of the week. And depending on what day you were admitted to the hospital, you'll see the ward you went to. So if you were admitted on the Monday, you'd go to the Monday ward. The Tuesday ward. The Wednesday ward. Don't worry, I won't tell you intelligence by repeating the days of the week. All that are left of the Friday, Saturday and Sunday wards. 3 of the others were bombed during the Blitz, and one of them was burnt down. They're now mostly used as just kind of training facilities, and there's a museum in there about Florence Nightingale and her Nightingale nurses. They were, well, Florence Nightingale was famous for pioneering such medical practices as washing your hands before you operated on somebody, and not turning up to work drunk. So we have her to thank for the sobriety of our medical personnel. But back to your left again, the New Palace of Westminster. It has not moved. That's not one of the things it does. So you'll see three towers on the palace. The largest tower with the Union flag flying is called the Victoria Tower. And after a general election, this is where all the ballot papers are kept, and they're kept there for a year before being destroyed. In the centre, you've got the very imaginative name of the Central Tower, and the tower right on the end, the most famous one with the clock face, is that not Big Ben. I know. Everything in your life is a lie. No, that's not Big Ben, that is the Elizabeth Tower. It was renamed from just being called the Clock Tower in 2012. Big Ben actually refers to the 13.5-ton bell which sits inside the tower, and just for reference, it sits between the second grey bit and the clock face. And it's surrounded by 4 smaller bells, and they are called the Westminster chimes, and they chime on the quarters of the hour. So now seems as good a time as any to talk about the reason that we are all here. Our reason for living, really. The Coca-Cola London Eye. Stands at 135 metres, and it's the tallest cantilevered observation wheel in the world. Cantilevered because it's only held up on one side, not two, and it's an observation wheel, not a Ferris wheel, because the bits on the outside, we call them the capsules. They stay on the outside of the structure at all times, which gives you the best views. You'll notice even right at the top, you're still outside. It was designed by husband and wife architect team David Marks and Julia Barfield, and it was completed in the year 2000. It was actually only intended to be around for 1 year, for the Millennium Year. And it cost £75 million to build, and that was all paid for by our original sponsors, who were British Airways. But it made all of that money back at its best 5 years of opening, and then it stuck around for another 12 years after that. So
I've got 36
in front of us are the Golden Jubilee footbridges, and they sandwich the Hungerford Railway Bridge, which takes place into Charing Cross Station on your left. Now, the Golden Jubilee footbridges were opened in 2002 for the Queen's Golden Jubilee, but they had to close very soon afterwards when they found an unexploded World War II bomb in the riverbed underneath, which we are just about to sail over. Don't worry, they've safely defused and removed it before they go the bridges again in 2003. And if you take a look at the bridges and then you crank your necks backwards and you take a look at the London Eye, then you look at the bridges again, then you look back at the London Eye, and then you look at the bridges again, and then you look back at the London Eye, you'll notice they look similar, and that's because these bridges were designed to complement the London Eye, which I think they do quite well. They are white, it is white. They are metal, it is metal. Overall, good job being done, I think. The area to our right-hand side, probably one of my favourite areas of London, it's collectively known as the South Bank Centre. So making up the South Bank Centre, you've got the Royal Festival Hall, which is a world-class concert hall and home to the London Philharmonic Orchestra. And that was built in 1951 for the Festival of Britain, which was a festival brought in to make everyone feel better after the Second World War and rationing and the Cold War was going on. It was all a bit rubbish. So they had an arts festival to make everyone feel better. Then you've got the Queen Elizabeth Hall and Purcell Room. They do smaller concerts, and behind them, you can't really see it, you can see white triangles on the roof. That's the Hayward Gallery, and they do exhibitions, and that's what this whole area is. It's a hub for the arts, all sorts of things going on, and it's a really nice area to just walk along the riverbank as well. You've got like street performers performing along there, and pop-up restaurants and shops and bars. Yeah, just a really nice area to take a stroll on a quiet, kind of sunny day like this. So we're going under Waterloo Bridge now. What you'll notice on this cruise is that a lot of the landmarks that you will see have nicknames, because why would you ever call anything by its proper name? So Waterloo Bridge is nicknamed the Ladies' Bridge. Bet you're wondering why that is. Well, I'm going to let you mull on that one, and I'll explain why it's called the Ladies' Bridge on our return journey. But to your right, you'll see a building that looks like a multi-storey car park with an electronic advertising sign. This is our Royal National Theatre. It's a prime example of brutalist architecture. It's meant to look in the eye. You'll see quite a bit of that along the river today. It was a form of architecture very prominent in the 1970s. Prince Charles actually described that building as looking like the back end of a nuclear power station. I know, not even the front end. But don't be deterred by the outside. On the inside, you have three fantastic world-class theatres, the largest of which is called the Olivier Theatre, named after Sir Lawrence Olivier, the famous actor and first artistic director of the National Theatre. And you've got the Littleton and the Dorfman in there as well. And currently they've got a fourth stage set up outside the National. It's a red wooden stage, it's called the River Stage, and they do kind of smaller things over the weekend. So they'll do like, I don't know, talks and concerts and gigs and things like that. And this weekend it's WOMAD, so WOMAD are on there. Go and find out about WOMAD. If theatre's not your thing, that's fine. We've just passed by the London ITV studios. ITV is the second largest TV broadcasting company here in the UK after the BBC, and it's brought us such educational and highbrow programmes as the Jeremy Kyle Show, Alan Carr's Chessy Man, Loose Women, and never forgetting Love Island. None of which, unfortunately, actually no, Alan Carr's Chessy Man is filmed in the London ITV studios, but Love Island isn't. Unfortunately. To your left, in front of you, you will catch a glimpse of St Paul's Cathedral, the domed cathedral. It's the second largest domed cathedral in the world after St Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, and it stands at 365 feet, or the mathematical view, that's 1 foot for every day of the year. It was designed by Sir Christopher Wren and completed in 1711, and it was actually built to replace its predecessor, which had burnt down in 1666 in the Great Fire of London. If you look at the top of the dome, you'll see a holy cross on top. Naturally, it's a cathedral. But actually, in Sir Christopher Wren's original designs, this was going to be a big gold pineapple, because what are superior? I have to say that. You've also got cocktail bars and restaurants in the Shard as well, and apartments as well. I think there's about 8 apartments in the Shard. An apartment in the Shard would set you back anything between 30 and 50 million pounds. Ouch. Incidentally, if there is anyone on the cruise today planning on buying an apartment in the Shard, see you later. In front of us, though, is London Bridge, London's most famous bridge, even though quite a lot of people don't actually know what it looks like. But to be fair, it has had a variety of facelifts in its rich 2,000-year history. So the first London Bridge was a wooden bridge built by the Romans in around 46 AD. Now the Thames is a tidal river, and the base of the river is made of mud and clay, so the wooden bridge didn't stay up very long, so they rebuilt it. And then it fell down again, and they rebuilt it. And then it fell down again. And this went on for hundreds of years until they built the first stone bridge across the Thames. Most famous of the London Bridge is the Medieval Bridge. It had hundreds of shops and houses all the way across, built 8 stories high. It had a church in the middle, and actually for those of you on the top deck, if you look up, just in front of you and to your left, you will see a red marking that's a circle with a cross through it and then a holy cross on top. That is the sign that a church once stood there. So if you see that anywhere in London, that's what that means. You had people selling things left, right and centre. It was basically a small city. It was very busy. It could take up to an hour to get from one side to the other. And it's also supposedly where we decided to drive on the left-hand side of the road to prevent congestion. The third, and that was the only crossing across the Thames until the 18th century, when obviously, until the 18th century. And then the third London Bridge was a Victorian bridge designed by Sir John Rennie, and that was sinking into the Thames. So it was bought by an American businessman for £1 million, and he shipped it brick by brick over to Arizona. And it now stands over Lake Havasu in Arizona. It's a very pretty bridge, much nicer than the ugly slab of concrete that we have standing over the Thames today. That one was opened in 1973. If you look to your left, you'll see a building almost completely obscured by scaffolding, which is a shame. It's a grey building, and it's called the Winchester Wharves. This is the site of the old Clink prison. You may recognise the phrase, "throw him in the clink." That's where this comes from. And you were thrown in a clink if you've been very naughty and haven't paid your taxes. They'd chuck you in there, you'd be tortured into oblivion in the hopes that you could then cough up. now a Starbucks. Eyeliner. Oh, how history has a funny way of pointing out the irony in life. We're going under Cannon Street Railway Bridge now. There's not a huge amount to say. It was designed by British Rail. From ugly bridges to pretty ones though, in front of us is Southwark Bridge. It's got a tragic past. It's nicknamed the Lonely Bridge, and that's because it's got the lowest footfall of any other bridge in London. It's got no major roads on or off it, it's got no major landmarks either side, and actually it's just really quite difficult to find. But if you manage to stumble through the portal, which leads you to Southwark Bridge, try and do so when it gets a bit darker, because they light it with green and purple LED lighting, and all the way across the bridge as well, you'll notice lamps, and they are partly gaslit. They're the only bridge in London that's partly gaslit, so you know, it's just very pretty, very romantic. Speaking of love, to your left again, is the Globe Theatre. It's a functioning theatre. You'll see the letters on the side of the building, LOVE. They're currently doing their Summer of Love. All of Shakespeare's love plays is currently forthcoming, which has had great reviews. So yeah, their season runs throughout the summer months, or what we like to call summer months, starting on the 23rd of April, which is both Shakespeare's birth and death date. And it's a theatre almost completely in the round, and the centre is standing room only. You can get tickets for as little as £5, and you're basically the ground length of Shakespeare's day, so you are the plebs. But you do have the best views because you are stood at the feet of the actors, and all of the drama, and it's great stuff. If you like Shakespeare, if you like theatre, though bearing in mind you could be standing up to 3 hours, this is Shakespeare. It's also an open-air theatre, and you're not allowed to take an umbrella. And this is the UK, so you can get wet. Beside that, the very large building with the 325-foot chimney, this is the Tate Modern Art Gallery. It used to be the old Bankside Power Station. It was designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, who also designed Battersea Power Station, Waterloo Bridge, and our famous red telephone boxes. But it had to close down as a power station because it was exuding too much smog into central London. And then it was reopened again in 2000 as the Tate Modern Art Gallery, and it now houses the largest collection of modern art in the world. I think it's about 9 floors of modern art from the 1900s to the present day. And even if modern art isn't your thing, most of it's free. So you could just walk around for free. Walking for free. That's novel. There's also a cocktail bar at the top as well. So you can go up to the cocktail bar, have a few cocktails, come back downstairs. Maybe you might start enjoying the modern art more. The building to our right, the red building with the glass atrium, that is where Harry Potter went to school. No, it's not Hogwarts, that's up in Scotland. This is where Daniel Radcliffe did his A-levels. It's called the new City of London School for Boys, and it's quite a prestigious all-boys school here in central London. To send your son there, it would cost you a mere £5,000 a term. Make sure you send your smartest
And I hope nobody would notice.
Anyway, there are graves to be listed, so they're not going anywhere. To your right, the grey building with the green slanted roof. This is the old City of London School for Boys. Winston Churchill went to this school for a time, and on the facade of the building you'll see statues of 4 famous scholars. They didn't actually go to the school themselves, but they were meant to inspire the boys that did. So from left to right you have Sir Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare, John Milton, and put in just a couple of years ago, holding his football, David Beckham. No, that is not true. If you believe that, you will believe anything. And that is Sir Isaac Newton holding a grave. To your left, the large red building with a tower on it that says Oxo. This is the Oxo building and the Oxo Tower. It used to be a meat manufacturing and storage warehouse, and it was owned by the company that makes the Oxo stock cubes. Now, you are currently travelling on a royal highway, ladies and gentlemen, and in the 1930s it was illegal to advertise your product on the Thames. That tower clearly saying Oxo. But when they were taken to court about it, their defence barrister turned around and said, "Oh no, that doesn't spell Oxo. They just ordered stained glass windows in random geometrical shapes and just so happened to get 2 noughts and a cross. And look how good. Yeah, and they got away with it. So I guess you just need to have the guts. The guts? It was a meat manufacturing warehouse? No? Okay. The stone glass windows also light up red and pink, which is the company colour. And just beside that, you can see the golden sands of the Costa del Rey, also known as Gabriel's Wall. And that gentleman there, yes, the gentleman there in the captain's hat, he is there almost every day doing fantastic sand sculptures. So I'd recommend going down there and seeing him. To your right, you'll see an archway. This is Temple Arch, and just on the back side there are some silver dragons or griffins. Now they are the point. They mark the point of the old City of London walls. So the walls that enclosed the City of London. And you'll see them at several points around London. And so they mark the point at which we leave the City of London, which nowadays is referred to as the 1 square mile financial district here in London. And then we enter the City of Westminster, the City of Royalty, or else just referred to as the West End, which is kind of where all the theatres and the shopping district are. And tradition states that if the Queen wishes to enter the City of London, she has to first ask permission from our Mayor of London, Sir Tom. In front of us is Waterloo Bridge, nicknamed the Ladies' Bridge. I hope you've all been having a sense think about this. I bet you all have. None of you forgot that it was called the Ladies' Bridge, and you've all been waiting to think why. So that's because this bridge was built during the Second World War, and all the men went off to fight for king and country. And the majority of the workforce that worked on the bridge were women. Now, there isn't any photographic evidence for this, but I just want to put something to you. It's the only bridge in London to have been completed on time. It's the only bridge in London to have been completed on budget. And, like Tower Bridge, it is a self-cleaning bridge. It's made of Portland stone, which cleans itself when it rains. So I put it to you. Ladies' Bridge? Can we have a little cheer for the ladies up here on the top deck, please? No. That's never happened to me before. I promise. As we go under Waterloo Bridge, you'll see that the bottom side is all dark and then dirty. That's because the rain can't get to it, because that's not the way that gravity works. As you come out from underneath the bridge, to your right, the large white building with the cream tiled roof. That's the Savoy Hotel. It's a very expensive hotel here in London. Taylor Swift likes to stay here when she comes. It's the first hotel in London to have electricity and ensuite bathrooms. So obviously the draw for Taylor Swift. It also has a theatre at the bottom of it, the Savoy Theatre. So Dreamgirls is on at the Savoy at the moment. Just on your right, on the bank side, you'll see a pointy obelisk. This is Cleopatra's Needle. It's an ancient Egyptian artifact, and it's the oldest thing that you will see in London today that's not in a museum. Over 3,500 years old. That's older than London itself. London is only about 2,000 years old. And it was gifted to the British government in 1812. Yes, it was gifted to us. We did not steal it. It's one of the few things we didn't steal. Yeah, it was gifted to us in 1812 for our help in the victory of the Battle of the Nile. And the sphinxes that you can see flanking it either side, they were put in 60 years later by the Victorians. And they're actually facing the wrong way. They should be facing away from the needle to guard it, but they're not. They're facing towards each other, just having a little chat. So that was our bad. As we go under these bridges, ladies and gentlemen, this is your last chance to wave at people. They are royal bridges, so royal waves are appreciated. And if you're looking for anywhere for lunch, just behind the Royal Festival Hall on our left, there's a great food market over the weekends, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. They have food stores from all over the world, and it's quite reasonably priced as well. So I definitely recommend that. To your right-hand side, the building that looks like a fairy tale castle and somewhere that Cinderella should live. This is Whitehall Court. It's based off of a French chateau, and it's always been office spaces and apartments, and it used to be the office spaces of the 19th century Liberal Party, whose most famous Prime Minister was William Gladstone, and up until the First World War it was the headquarters of the British Secret Service. George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright, also had an apartment in there. And it's now partly the Royal Horse Guards Hotel and partly apartment buildings. Yeah. Very expensive, lush apartments. Directly beside that, the large white building with the green roofs and all the flags flying, that's our MOD, our Ministry of Defence. It's nicknamed the Iceberg Building, and that's because 2/3 of this building are rumoured to be underground for security reasons. Supposedly there's a nuclear fallout